Prior to 1953, 8-cylinder equipped Buicks were of the inline variety. The first V8 to be developed after World War II was of a unique design which used an unusual vertical alignment of small intake and exhaust valves whose stems were noticeably longer than most valves produced at the time. This was due to the intake and exhaust valves both positioned on the intake side of the heads in a pent roof design. This design meant the camshaft needed a higher lift and longer duration to work effectively, producing solid horsepower numbers while creating massive amounts of torque. These valves, especially the exhaust valves with their long stems and small heads, resembled a nail when out of the head. An easy way to instantly spot a Nailhead engine is the cylinder heads are positioned at the same angle in relation to the intake manifold. In other words, horizontal to the ground. Fully dressed and detailed with vintage speed equipment, minimal chrome, and lots of paint detail, they're among the most beautiful vintage engines ever made. In a hot rod, they're especially cool when equipped with multiple carburation. The sound they make when properly hot rodded is absolute magic. The Nailhead series of V8 engines would be used continuously in production Buicks through 1966, and in this video we'll cover the basics of each one: the 264, the 322, the 364, the 401, and finally the 425. Because they were made for many years in large numbers, replacement parts and speed equipment, both vintage and modern, are readily available. They can produce solid horsepower numbers and huge torque specs, and are civilized enough to take a car cross-country if that's what the owner wants to do. The first generation of the Nailhead appeared for the 1953 model year as a replacement for the durable and dependable inline 8s found in Buicks clear back to the pre-war era. The higher series car used a V8 displacing 322 cubes and pumping out 170 horsepower. After World War II, new car buyers, especially those that had more money to spend, increasingly demanded luxury, a smoother ride, convenience options galore, and excellent power. Certainly, Buick offered all that in spades plus more. But customers were most excited about the improved legendary 2-speed Dynaflow transmission. During this era, Buick customers ranked smoothness above other marketing objectives, and the Dynaflow's non-shifting design was demonstrably smoother than the majority of the rough-shifting, crudely designed automatics that were available then. With the Dynaflow, a high-torque engine was a necessity to provide the expected adequate acceleration, which is precisely what the Nailhead was specifically designed to deliver. The larger 322 was derived from the 264 used by Buick from 1953 through 1956 in the Roadmaster, Super, and Century models, and the Special in 1956. In my research, this tidbit surprised me. The 322 was also used in the 1956 and 57 10,000 series conventional cab Chevrolet heavy-duty trucks marketed as the Loadmaster. In the ever-increasing quest for more horsepower, Buick engineers had a new Nailhead waiting in the wings for the 1957 model year. It now displaced 364 cubic inches and could easily compete with nearly every other car being built in America at the time. Not only would these engines be larger in cubic inches, but they'd also have a newly designed cylinder block, better breathing cylinder heads with larger combustion chambers, and new exhaust manifolds, streamlined in their shape to facilitate the more efficient flow of spent gases. This new block also meant these engines could increase in cubic inch displacement and compression without the need for engine block revisions during the design's lifetime. Buick's second variation of the improved Nailhead was produced from 1957 to 61. The Fireball name was dropped after 1957, but the 364 was briefly called the B12000, referring to the 12,000 pounds of force generated by each piston. Second-generation Buick V8s were all painted late Buick green, with the exception of those installed in the 1963 Riviera, which were silver, and the 1966 Riviera, which were red. For these 5 model years, the Special Series cars came standard with a 250 horsepower 2-barrel engine, while all others had the 300 horsepower 4-barrel version installed at the factory as standard equipment. For 1958, General Motors, along with most all other domestic manufacturers in the industry, saw a recession coming and wisely chose to simply upgrade existing models rather than spend money to develop completely redesigned or even totally new models. That would happen the following year, when many domestics debuted radically updated models or completely new ones. For 1959, Buick opted to rename 2 of their newest models. The base Super was now called the Invicta, and the largest and most luxurious models went from the Roadmaster to the Electra and Electra 225. The 225 designation was given to the largest cars in the series. It denoted the car's overall length was 225 inches. Soon it was nicknamed the Deuce and a Quarter. The lesser series cars, Invicta and LeSabre, continued to use the previous 364 cubic inch V8, now producing 314 horsepower, while the enlarged 401 pumped out 325 ponies. The 364 would only be seen for 2 more model years, replaced in 1962 by the 401. Originally and correctly identified as a 401, it was later redesignated a 400, with no change in displacement, to meet 1960s GM directives for maximum allowable engine displacements in their midsize cars. Until the end of the 1966 model year, the 400 became Buick's performance power plant of choice. This engine was used and identified in different versions as the Wildcat 375, the Wildcat 410, and the Wildcat 445, depending on the torque rating that each version produced. The various Wildcat engines had decals on their air cleaners, identifying which engine was under the hood. However, the 4-barrel edition of the 1966 and 67 small block Buick 340 was also labeled a Wildcat 375 on its air cleaner, but it was definitely not a Nailhead. While the 401 was in production, Buick engineers also developed a larger displacement 425 cubic inch V8 for the 1963 model year, which was coincidentally the same year the Riviera debuted as its own model. This was GM's first real competitor to the Ford Thunderbird in the ever-growing personal luxury car class. Standard with the 325 horsepower 401, a buyer could now choose a 425, putting out 340 horsepower as an option after December of 1962. Soon after, the 425 engine was also available on Electra and Wildcat models. However, the 1964 and 66 Riviera had the 425 as standard equipment, but the 65s did not. It went back to the 401. That's because for 1965, Buick offered the Grand Sport option for the first time on the Riviera. This was a dual quad 425 engine with a recurved distributor, larger dual exhaust pipes, and a more aggressive 342 rear axle ratio. In addition, a buyer could option the H2 package, consisting of heavy-duty suspension, quicker steering, and more. For its size and weight, the Buick Riv was an impressive performance machine for its time. 4-barrel carburation was standard on the basic 425, called the Wildcat 465 for the foot-pounds of torque it made. The Super Wildcat option included 2 4-barrel carbs plus other performance enhancements. and was an available option for the 1964 Riviera and Electra, the 1965 Riviera Grand Sport, and the 1966 Wildcat GS. Coded MW, these parts were delivered in the car's trunk from the factory for dealer installation. Toward the end of the 1966 model year, around May of '66, Buick offered the Super Wildcat 465 with factory-installed dual 4-barrel Carter AFB carburetors as the MZ option. For 1967, Buick engineers had determined that the Nailhead design had maxed out its potential as a performance engine. By now, every domestic automaker was waist-deep in the muscle car wars. A new family of engines were ready to take the baton from the Nailhead, a design that had served Buick well for nearly a decade and a half. The new design would displace 400, 430, and 455 cubic inches, and could be found on Buicks of all descriptions from 1967 until their demise after the 1976 model year. Many people think that other GM divisions that had similar cubic inch displacement V8s at the time shared in their design and production, but that's simply not true. A Pontiac and an Oldsmobile built 400 or 455 engine shared only a few components between the three. The Nailhead is as legendary an early V8 engine as the Ford Flathead, the small block Chevrolet, and the Chrysler Hemi, among others. Tell us what you think of the Nailhead. Is it one of Buick's best, or is there another you prefer? Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon.